Thomas had lived alone for 11 years. Not unhappily. He was clear about that when he told the story later. He had his routines, his work, his small garden, his particular way of spending a Sunday that required no adjustment for anyone else's preferences. What he did not have was a cat. He had, in fact, spent several conversations across several years explaining to various people why he did not have a cat. Because cats, in his considered opinion, were indifferent creatures who performed affection on their own terms and gave nothing reliably back. The cat arrived in October, not dramatically. It simply appeared at the edge of his garden one evening, thin and watchful, with the specific, careful assessment of a stray that has learned to read situations before committing to them. Thomas put food out, not from sentiment, from the practical acknowledgement that the cat was clearly hungry and the food was available. He told himself, and told anyone who asked, that this was not adopting a cat. This was managing a garden situation. The cat moved closer over 2 weeks, not because Thomas invited it. He maintained, loudly, to himself, that this was a temporary arrangement, but because the cat had conducted its own assessment and had arrived at a conclusion Thomas had not been consulted about. By November, the cat was sleeping on the end of Thomas's bed. Thomas had named it Oliver. He told no one about the name for 3 weeks, as though naming it might be admissible as evidence against his earlier position. Their life together was not dramatic. Oliver was not a performing cat. He did not do things for an audience. He was simply present. On the windowsill when Thomas read, at the end of the kitchen table when Thomas ate, at the foot of the bed through the night. Thomas told himself this was convenience. The cat had found warm shelter and reliable food. Oliver, if he had a position on the matter, gave no indication of what it was. He simply stayed near the person he had chosen to stay near. In February, Thomas became seriously ill. Not dangerously. He recovered, but significantly, a high fever that ran for 4 days. The kind that produces the specific, suspended unreality of a sick person who is too unwell to do anything but lie still and wait for the body to finish what it has started. He was alone in the house. He had his phone. He had water. He had managed to put beside the bed before the worst of it arrived. And he had Oliver. Oliver did not leave the bed for 4 days. This is not a small thing for a cat. Oliver was an animal who valued his own movement, who came and went, who had his own schedule of windows and garden observations that he maintained with consistent dedication. For 4 days, he abandoned all of it. He pressed himself against Thomas's side, and he stayed, not at the foot of the bed, against him, through the fever, through the night, through every hour of it. At 3 in the morning on the second night, the worst night, the one Thomas remembered most clearly afterward, he woke from a fever sleep to find Oliver sitting upright beside his head, not sleeping, watching him, with the specific, alert stillness of an animal that has been awake while the person beside it was not, keeping a watch it had not been asked to keep, over a person who had spent 2 years insisting it was incapable of caring about anyone. At some point during that night, Oliver pressed his head against Thomas's hand. Not the way cats seek to be stroked, the way they push their head into your palm, asking for contact. The other way, pressing outward, offering. The gesture of something giving rather than taking. Thomas, who was running a high fever and was not at his most analytical, understood it completely. He put his hand on the cat's head. Oliver stayed. They stayed like that until morning. On the fourth day, Thomas's fever broke. He sat up for the first time in 4 days. And Oliver, who had been pressed against him through every hour of it, stood up, stretched, walked to the window, and resumed his usual observation of the garden below. The watch was over. The thing that had required the watch was over. Oliver returned to being a cat in the ordinary way of cats, as though the 4 days had been simply what was required. And the requirement was now complete. Thomas sat on the edge of his bed and watched Oliver at the window. He sat there for a long time, not because he was still unwell, because he was thinking about the last 4 days with the specific attention of someone revising a position they have held for a very long time. The cat had not asked to be acknowledged. The cat had not performed its loyalty for an audience. It had simply stayed through the worst of it, because that is what Oliver did when the person he had chosen needed him to. He told the story differently than he expected to tell it. He had expected to tell it as an amusing anecdote about a cat that happened to stay close while he was sick. The kind of story that ends with a wry acknowledgement that the cat was warmer than expected and moves on. Instead, he found himself telling it slowly, with the specific care of someone describing something that turned out to be more than the category they had originally assigned it to. Thomas still lives in the same modest house. Oliver is still there. The arrangement that Thomas insisted was temporary has entered its 4th year. And when the subject of cats comes up, which it does, because it always does, because there are always people who hold